Coalition governments in South Africa are messy, unstable partnerships, and they are also leading to a deterioration of basic services to communities. Now, a two-day national dialogue is being held to look at how to stabilize coalitions in the country. Well, it's being led by Deputy President Paul Mashatile and brings together political parties, government and civil society. Our senior reporter, Siphamandla Goge, he's in Cape Town and he joins me now just to talk about what exactly is happening there in Cape Town at the moment. But of course, Siphamandla, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, he delivered a speech earlier regarding this. What were some of the key takeaways there?
I'm struggling to hear you, but let me tell you that that two-day program is underway. Today is day one. What has been happening is a number of political parties have been making their input and contribution. The keynote address being delivered by the leader of government business, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, whom basically was, mapping a way for what needs to be done to ensure that there is a proper framework for South Africa in dealing with coalition governments. Our viewers would recall that at the center of instability in a number of hung councils across the country, including big metros in Gauteng, is the issue of coalitions or working together agreements or arrangements. And now, with 2024 fast approaching, the reality is that the electorate may force political parties to negotiate and work together. They may actually decide that, well, political parties have to come together and decide how they share power, especially if you take into account what has been happening at the local government sphere. It's not confirmed that after 2024 you will have hung provincial legislatures or even a national assembly of that sort. But the reality of the situation is it would appear that coalition governments are upon us in South Africa. It will not be a new thing. It's been happening in the local government sphere, but come provincial and national general election, that's where all these political parties, that are represented inside here are discussing. If my memory serves me well, almost all of them, with the exception of the economic freedom fighters, are attending. The EFF, I have not seen their representative. The speaker, that is Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, did call their representative to come and speak, and when they were acknowledged, there was no one who took to the podium when Professor Thuli Madonsela, who's one of the program directors, also called on them to come and take their 10 minutes to make their point. So most political parties represented in the National Assembly are attending here. They are discussing one thing really, to say if and when it happens that there is a need to form a coalition government at a provincial and national level, what should be done. However, they are also focusing on the current chaotic councils in the country, local government sphere. The Deputy President saying whatever happens needs to work for the people of South Africa. Let's take a listen to him.
Coalitions must therefore give us the possibility to consolidate national efforts to create a truly substantive democracy that is based on the will of the people.
But of course, Siphamandla, I hope you can hear me. The other question is, when we take a look at the ANC, the ruling party, and their way of thinking and aligning themselves, are they on board as a party as a whole with this and the way of thinking when it comes to coalitions?
Of course, the ANC, will tell you that they are of the idea that these engagements are crucial. Their Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, who was the first politician to speak on behalf of the African National Congress, which is the governing party in this country, said, listen, we understand the need to discuss this, but as the ANC, we believe that we'll have the outright majority to govern come 2024. So Mr. Mbalula saying their focus currently is on the local government sphere, these chaotic metros in Gauteng in particular, and those young councils across the country, saying it affects service delivery. The biggest losers currently are the voters and saying, well, it's okay to negotiate with other parties in terms of what needs to be done to form coalitions after the 2024 general election. However, he says there are certain values and principles that they will not compromise on, and those include the issue of transparency, the issue of all political parties declaring their needs and interests. However, Mr. Mbalula saying that has to be driven by what the people want. And also the IFP saying, well, they accept the fact that coalition governments are upon us, hence they are negotiating with all political parties. They are open to working with anyone and everyone, is the question I also posed to the DA's Helen Zille, who's also attending here together with John Steenhuisen. And let's take a listen to how Mr. Velekosini Hlabisa and Ms. Zille responded to those questions.
The IFP felt it necessary that we come and participate in this dialogue because we accept the fact that coalition governments have come to stay in South Africa. We see the disturbances that are taking place in hung municipalities. We would not want to see this happening at a provincial and national level, but of course the IFP has gone a step further because we are in a preparatory talks for a coalition government in 2024 so that we are not caught unprepared.
Well, the Democratic Alliance has been taking the lead in this. Right after the 2021 election, we predicted very clearly that these coalitions couldn't work because you have many tiny parties that can't even get often 1% of the vote or 2% of the vote really dictating what happens, and that's completely undemocratic. Every country that has workable coalitions has a system where there are thresholds, and we have long been proposing that thresholds are necessary in South Africa as well if coalition governments are going to work.
And then, of course, Siphamandla, we heard a few days ago from the ANC Veterans League. They are totally against coalitions. What's your opinion on that, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, it's interesting because the party or the positions or the position of the Veterans League of the ANC is that they are not supporting a decision to work with economic freedom fighters. They say the EFF does not share certain views and values with the ANC. They say they'd rather consider other alternatives and other parties to work with. It's a point that will continue to divide the ANC because there are certain people within the ANC who feel that they can do or have a better deal with the EFF, but the party's veterans are saying the EFF is a no-no. But let me just interview the president now of the ATM. They've just made their input inside and then they've staged a walkout. I want to find out from him. Babzungula, thank you very much for your time. Why did you walk out? Why did you walk out after making your input and not before making your input?
Look, Siphamandla, it was important that we advise and let South Africans know the shame of this so-called dialogue. This dialogue has got nothing to do about the interests of South Africans. It is a scheme of the ANC to prepare for a grand coalition for next year. So they are utilizing state machinery in order to form the so-called a pact that is similar to the DA using state resources. Number one, the ANC is desperate to hold on to power by making proposals that a party with the largest number of votes must lead to a coalition. In other words, they know they'll be below 50% next year. So they want to make that coalition for next year to be the ones that are leading it. Secondly, they want to make a proposal that there must be a threshold of parties that are going to be represented in parliament. We as the ATM, we are not in support of that, and that is why we spoke what we needed to say and we left.
What is your position, though, when it comes to coalitions? Never mind that you've got your misgivings about the ANC. How would you like the issue of the coalitions to be handled?
Look, they must be based on principle. They must be based on respect. They must be based on the principle of working together for the betterment of our society. Not a case whereby the big parties, they want to play around with the so-called smaller parties, because who is leading in terms of submitting the motions of no confidence in across all coalitions? It is always the big parties, but they come here and they act as if they are the ones that are victims, whereas they are the ones that instigate all of this instability.
So simply put, you agree with the Freedom Front Plus that it doesn't matter who got how many votes when it comes to negotiating to work together, it has to consider a number of factors, not the majority factor.
Look, what is important is that when you form coalitions, there must be ideological similarities, there must be policy similarities, so that you are able to work together on a shared program of action, not a case whereby you want to form coalitions because you want to exclude certain parties.
So are you done for this dialogue? Are you not coming back tomorrow at the rest of the program?
Sizotin.
Thank you very much for your time. I'm asking Mr. Zungula if they are coming back tomorrow since it continues. Well, he is asking me to do what? Sizotini. So that tells you that the ATM is not coming back here. They feel that this is unfair, but they've made their input inside and then they are walking away now. They are walking out. It's done for them. But we'll continue to monitor what is happening inside. There will be commissions and breakaway sessions with the hope that there will be a declaration after this two-day dialogue is over.
Siphamandla Goge, of course, very interestingly there, the ATM walking out of that meeting, the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments, they actually released a statement, and just a part of it says, we are not going to give credence to this gathering that clearly has unconstitutional objectives by participating in it any further, as it undermines and excludes indigenous faith groups and parties represented in Parliament. But basically also saying that the bigger parties are undermining the smaller parties when it comes to coalitions, and the ANC basically just wants to use this meeting to cement themselves come 2024 being the leaders when it comes to coalitions and decisions regarding that.